Of Marx. Marx thought very highly of Darwin. He was going to dedicate capital to Darwin. He sent the dedication, but Darwin, I think, politely refused because he had enough trouble on his plate with the church and so on, so he thought it wasn't very wise. But before Darwin, people actually thought that the human species and all animal species were all separate, all fixed, never changed. Okay? They were all created by God. They all went into Noah's Ark, you know. The animals were in 2 by 2. That God created the world in how long? How many days? 6. That's a clever person. Most people would say 7. 6, yes! And on the 7th day he rested. See, God was a good trainer. He wouldn't work on a Sunday. On the 7th day he rested. That he created everything. It is all fixed since that time. There are people who still believe this. In America, and so there's people that are trying to force the American schools to teach creationism alongside Darwinism. They dare not cancel out Darwinism anymore. Darwin's great contribution is show that, on the contrary, species change. Species have evolved over a long period of time, and we ourselves have evolved from lower animals. By the way, I don't know if you know this, long before Darwin, a Greek philosopher, materialist, discovered this also, Anaxagoras, said that man had developed from a fish, and he proved it by comparing human embryos, which go through all the stages, and fossils. Remarkable. Thousands of years ago. Everything changes. Now that's a very profound idea, because most people can't get their heads around this, the idea of constant change. They can't accept it. And history changes. For example, capitalism. I mean, I'm sure that if, as I hope, at the end of this discussion you'll all become convinced Marxists, absolutely and raring to go to fight for socialism. If that's the case, I shall be very delighted. But if you go home and discuss this with your parents, I'm fairly sure what the reaction of some of them will be. And what they will say to you is, "Oh no, don't go down that road. No. Listen, I used to think like that when I was your age. You know this one? I used to think like that when I was your age. But as I got older, I realized this utopian, it's not possible because of human." Oh, by the way, do not believe that people get older and wiser. Don't you believe it. Most people get older and more stupid. That's a separate item. Don't let them pull that one. Oh, I realize that it's not possible because of human nature. You can't change human nature. You heard that? You cannot change human. People are naturally greedy and so. Let me tell you something. So-called human nature has changed many times in the course of history. Many times. And ideas and customs of which we today find absolutely abhorrent, at one time were considered quite normal. Example, slavery. Which seems pretty abhorrent to us, but at the time of Aristotle was a genius because he posed the question, is slavery moral? That was showed he was head. Nobody else asked it. And even he had to answer, no, it is moral because the slaves are not proper human beings. They haven't got souls. Women also, by the way. Women and slaves were less than human because they lacked souls. This idea was generally accepted at the time. Let me give you a case in point. I don't know whether this dates me. There is a film, or there was a film called The Flintstones. You heard of this film? Yeah, you have. Great, fantastic. I thought that maybe you wouldn't have heard of it. You know what it's about. Fred and Wilma Flintstone, you know. Here is a society about a million years ago. There's dinosaurs a long time, alongside human beings, but and it's very interesting because 1 million years ago, here's a society where there's money and banks and bankers and private property and police and prisons and armies and the bourgeois family in which the man is oppressed by the woman. In other words, just like today. Now, before you say anything, I do actually possess a sense of humor, and I am aware that it's meant to be funny. I'm aware of this fact. Even Marxists do have a sense of humor. Yes, but people believe this. People actually, they think, oh no, it's always been like this. We've always had rich and poor. They believe it. They believe it. It's not an idea, it's a prejudice. And it is false. It's completely false. As a matter of fact, the society in which we live, capitalism, has only existed for approximately 200 years. Okay? How long do you think the human species has been around? By human, I mean Homo sapiens sapiens, which is the species which most of us tend to belong to, although somebody's got my doubts. some people. How long have we been around? Anyone know? How long?
4,000.
Oh, more than that. More than that. Much more than that. Good guess anyway. Anyone else? Well, you could, it depends on this difference. You could, at most, 100,000 years, you could say. 100,000 years would be more or less around. Capitalism, class society, that the division of society between rich and poor, private ownership and so on and so forth, has only existed for how long, do you think? Class society. So-called civilization is known as. How long?
4,000 years?
More than that. You're very conservative. You bet. 10,000 years. Go back to the Middle East, there's some conversation from Iraq. But in Jordan they found human settlements, and in Turkey going back 10,000 years ago. That's when it started, the division of society between rich and poor, private property, the state. Bless you. Before that, what was there? I'll tell you. Before that, there was a society in which money, private property, and the state were completely unknown. Primitive tribal communism. The remnants of that still exist. There's a few of them left now, but in the Amazon jungle and so on, there's still a few odd tribes that they haven't yet succeeded in civilizing. They get along quite well without money, without private property, without banks, without bankers, without Gordon Brown, without David Cameron, and quite happy under these circumstances. Communism, there was no private property. No private property. And people regarded that as quite natural until what is known as the Neolithic Revolution 10,000 years ago. It's a separate time. But what I'm saying to you is this. The idea that human society does not change is false. It's so false, it's ridiculous, it's laughable. Okay? There have been several, broadly speaking, several great social transformations. The first was slave society, which lasted quite some time. That then collapsed. Then you had feudal society, which rose and also went into decline. And finally, for the last 200 years, we've had this wonderful capitalist system, okay, which is supposed to be the natural state of man, which is false. Comically, ridiculously, absurdly false. No such thing. Capitalist system is very recent, with all its morality and its religion and its concepts and its structures. That's only existed for 200 years, which means if you can examine imagine a clock of 24 hours, representing the last 100,000 years that we've been on this planet, then class society would only have existed for approximately the last 5 minutes or less, and capitalism would only have existed for about 1 minute or 10 seconds, whatever, a very short space of time. Okay. Therefore, what you have to understand is that the different forms of society come, the same as you and I, are born, they come into existence, they expand for a while to the degree that they're able to develop the productive forces. They will expand and develop. Then they reach a critical point in which that's no longer possible. They enter into a phase of decline, senility, and eventually they collapse, giving rise to a new social formation. I repeat, this has happened several times, and each time, by the way, it's accompanied by a religious revolution, an artistic revolution, and a moral revolution. We change. People change. And it's my contention that the capitalist system, which, by the way, originally did play a very progressive role, a very revolutionary role. I mean, if one looks at human progress in terms of technology, science, and so on, there's no comparison. The progress that's been made over the last 200 years puts in the shade all of the previous development for the last 10,000 years of so-called civilization. Yes, but it's my contention that this now has reached a limit in which this system no longer functions, no longer is capable of satisfying human needs, and the continuation of this system puts a question mark not just on the future of human civilization and civilized values, it puts a question mark even on the continuation of the human race. If we permit the whole world economy, the whole planet, all the major decisions to be taken purely on the basis of private greed of a handful of individuals, I'm not referring to a moral condemnation. You think what you like about it. What I am saying is this. Certain things flow from that. The destruction of the tropical forests, the destruction of the ozone layer, the poisoning of the food that we eat, the water that we drink, all for the sake of profit, because this system is not based upon the production of the human needs. if it was a question of a rational economy in which science, industry, technique, agriculture were placed at the disposal of the human race, we'd solve all the problems very quickly. You better believe it. But it's not for that. It isn't for that. It's purely on the basis of profit, as can be easily detected. And this has terrible consequences for the future of humanity. Historically, the application of dialectical materialism into society is known as historical materialism. I've dealt with that briefly in what I've just said. You can see how society develops. You can see the contradictions within society. And you can also, any student of history can see that societies precisely come into existence, develop, enter into crisis, and then enter in decline. You don't think that this system is in a phase of decline? Well, just have a look at your television sets and compare what you see with, for example, the 300 years decline of the Roman Empire. There's striking comparisons, very striking, which I can elaborate on that if you wish. Economics, the economic theories of Marx have been borne out. Incidentally, Capital, which is Karl Marx's great economic masterpiece, which for years and years was shunted to one side, is now a bestseller in Germany specifically, since the crisis of capitalism. Why is it a bestseller? Because all of the theories of the orthodox economists have failed miserably. I didn't bring them tonight. I could bring a few quotes from prominent